Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar here with HYCU. We're going to give you a couple seconds just to get settled in and let everybody join. So let's pause for about 30 seconds. You can get your coffee, sit down, get your headphones on, and we'll get ready in a couple of seconds. In the meantime, I will start with sharing my screen. Mark, just please confirm when you're able to see that.
Of course. Hey, everybody. Good morning. Yeah, I can see it, Andy.
Okay, perfect. Perfect. While everyone's getting settled, we'll get started in a few seconds.
Bunch of people joining.
Okay, perfect. What we'll do is we'll do a quick introduction as to why we're here and go through a couple housekeeping items. But we're very excited because this is the inaugural session of the State of SaaS Protection. And what I love about this is actually a private event. This is only for HYCU customers and partners. Whether you're an actual user of HYCU today or a partner, you'll be able to have insider information. And really, the reason that we did this was from the product team. We wanted to make sure you understood why we're releasing so much. What are we building? Why did we build it? What kind of problems are we looking to solve? And from there, birth the State of SaaS Protection. And what you're going to see today actually is episode 1. Now, before we get into all of that, just a couple of housekeeping items. If you have any questions, do not use the chat function, use the Q&A function. That way, Mark and I can address them as quickly as possible. If there are a lot of questions, depending on who's speaking, Mark and I will answer them. But if not, we will answer all of these questions live. So if there's something that comes up right at the end, we will make sure to turn on your microphone and you will be able to ask any question. This session is recorded. This session will also be available on demand. You will shortly receive an email with the on-demand recording link once we're ready and we're done with the webinar. So with that, remember, any questions, please use the Q&A. This will be recorded. You will have access to the slides. You can send this to your colleagues. Now back to the material at hand. So the State of SaaS Protection. The first topic that we want to address this month, and this is going to be a monthly series, and we would love your input if there's any specific topic, any aspect of our platform that you're looking for, whether you are a Nutanix customer, VMware, AWS, Google Cloud, or any of our SaaS applications. Please let us know what you're interested in, whether it's a specific topic, best practices, we will accommodate and make sure that we can drive the use cases that matter to you. But for today's episode, we're going to talk about something very, very interesting. It's something that usually gets overlooked, but it's so critical to every organization. Whether you are in the engineering department, in DevOps, but even in IT, GitHub security is very critical to understand. And we're really going to focus it today around merging data protection itself with your DevOps workflow. It's not usually something that goes hand in hand, but it's critical in the world of SaaS. So with that, I'm going to do a short introduction. And as I mentioned, this series is going to be from the HYCU product team to our customers, to our partners like yourselves. I'm Andy Fernandez. I'm the Director of Product Management here, and I'll let Mark introduce himself.
Sure. Thanks, Andy. Hey, hello, everybody. My name is Mark Nijmeijer. I'm Senior Director of Product Management here at HYCU. I kind of lead what we're talking about today, right? Is the really, how do we back up, how do we protect applications that are running out there as a SaaS, many different SaaS services out there. So yeah, very enthusiastic being here today, allowing to share some knowledge with you. So yeah, handing it back over to you. Let's get started.
Thank you, Mark. And you'll also see other members of the product team join us in the future, whether it's Shiva on our product management side, Marko Lubjanovic on solutions engineering. You will see all sorts of members of HYCU, depending on the expertise and the focus that we have. So you will see many more of our product folks that you probably have already worked with on these webinars as well. But let's get started and take a quick look at the agenda. This is exactly what we're going to cover today. We're going to keep things brief and concise. We're going to go over exactly why you even need to protect GitHub, why you even think about GitHub in the context of data protection. We're going to go over the specific responsibilities, both from a security and a data protection perspective, but actually understand why there is a need to protect it. What are the threats to the data, the configuration stored in GitHub? And my favorite part of any webinar that we do is that there's always a live demo. And Mark's going to go over an actual live demo of a full backup and restore process for GitHub itself. And of course, there's going to be a Q&A. Remember, any question you have, please use the Q&A tab and we will answer them as quickly as possible. Now, this is a bit of a meme, and it's funny, but it's very, very true. And when you think about any organization, any ecosystem, an open source project, our financial system, there's a ton of infrastructure, and there's always some small fraction of data, some small project that somebody is keeping active that truly is powering the whole thing and keeping it afloat. And nobody knows what it is, nobody knows how important it is, only until it goes down. Now, obviously, this is something that's mass market and it really talks about something else. But there's a reason we brought it up, because we truly believe that GitHub is even more critical than you already think. And there's several reasons why. And we're going to show you in the context from build to run, the role of GitHub and why the data, the configurations, the files, the functions stored in there are so, so important. Now, why is GitHub so critical? Well, the easiest answer really is your IP. Think of GitHub as your brain. It's where you store your source code, your libraries. Your team has their dependencies, schema, scripts, testing code, configuration files, you name it. This is what these repositories are there for. And they hold all this knowledge, years of work, years of QA within GitHub. This alone is a reason to take GitHub protection so seriously, even if you're using it as a SaaS offering as well. But it's beyond just your source code. It's beyond just your IP. It's how your applications run. It's how your organization maybe runs. Now, let's talk a little bit about DevOps. Let's talk about actually infrastructure as code, your deployments, your CI/CD pipelines. All of them have information stored in GitHub, whether it's your templates in Terraform or in CloudFormation, or even configurations in something like Circle CI or Jenkins or Travis CI. It doesn't matter what your organization uses, you are storing critical configurations and scripts inside of GitHub. It's almost serving as a form of version control for your organization. And if you lose these templates, then you have to rebuild them. And there could even be potential downtime. There's loss of knowledge. Some of these templates are well architected and they take a while to build. Losing that information would be very, very critical, and there would be severe consequences to the business. But that's just simply infrastructure as code, that's deploying. But that also applies to the CI/CD component too. But as we get closer to production, it also applies to the cloud services that you're using, the infrastructure as a service that you're using within these organizations. Think, for example, your IAM roles, whether you're an AWS user or an Entra ID user or a Google IAM user, there are specific roles, policies, scripts that you keep, and that's how you know how your organization works. Who accesses what, who has access to it, who's able to, what talks to what application. All of that critical information is stored in these services. That applies to Azure and Google as well. And it's not just identity, but it's also networking. It's VPCs. It's all of these different services that power your modern applications. They hold critical information. And guess where a lot of that is stored? In GitHub. And of course, we can talk about production. We can talk about compute serverless, whether you're using traditional infrastructure, for example, EC2 instances or Google Compute Engine, or you're actually using containerized applications. Regardless, you are storing critical information within GitHub, those YAML files, your configurations. Not only are we talking about containerized apps and that form of compute, but also serverless as well. For example, what if you lost all of your Lambda functions or your Azure functions? Where do they go? Well, they're all stored in GitHub. It's your memory of your prod app, but also everything that you use to build, run, and deploy these production applications. So when you actually think of it, and I got to give credit to Mark here for remaking this, GitHub is at the source of your business apps. And there's somebody managing it, there's somebody responsible for it, and they usually don't get all the credit, but it's one of the most important building blocks within your organization. Not just your DevOps, not just IT, but within your organization. And we have to take the protection of it extremely seriously. So you think, well, Andy, that's a great idea. Of course, it's important, but that's why I'm paying GitHub to do so. That's why I'm using GitHub as a SaaS. It's not deployed as a server. It is, I subscribe to it and I expect people to protect it. But that's where we really have to dive in a little bit more into the rules of SaaS. Where does your responsibility stop? Where does it start? Whether it's GitHub or any other application like Jira or Salesforce or even Microsoft 365. This is my dumb analogy, but I think it's pretty effective when you think about the role of SaaS, the role as you, a customer, versus GitHub, the provider. Think of it as a parking garage. Mark lives near San Francisco. Parking is very difficult. Mark goes downtown. He would like to get dinner. He's going to use a garage. He wants to make sure his car is safe. Now, when Mark uses a garage, he expects the garage to be open, that he can pay for it and that the lights are on, that he has access to the garage. But if Mark accidentally rolls down the window, I know the weather is over there much better than what we have. He rolls down the window, he leaves his laptop. Well, guess what? Somebody steals that laptop. The garage is not responsible for Mark's laptop. If somebody scratches Mark's car, the garage is not responsible. They hold no responsibility for it. So for the car and the contents of the car, Mark is responsible. The same thing applies to your data, your configurations, your repository. Regardless of what it is, if you're using it as a SaaS, you are still responsible for your car. What does that actually mean, though, from a full breakdown? Well, what is GitHub, the garage, actually responsible for? Well, they have to maintain the system. GitHub, the system across the world. This means they have to have full infrastructure security. They have to secure your applications. There needs to be operational security. They have to encrypt information, and they have to be compliant as a system. And they also have to be able to perform high availability and disaster recovery as a system. But you, the tenant, the driver of the car, are responsible for something else, but still responsible. You are responsible for keeping your account secure. If your password for GitHub is password, then that is on you if something happens. GitHub will not take responsibility for that. You also have to make sure that you take the measures to secure your code, to classify your data, to classify who can access your data and when, and to keep track of that. But you also have to understand your compliance requirements and how you're able to manage that. But the most important thing for today's topic, though, is the difference between backup and DR at the system level versus the tenant level. So the garage, GitHub has to keep backups and DR across the board. But these are not meant for specific tenants. If you delete something, if you corrupt something, if you're exploited, then you have to keep a backup to be able to recover yourself. Of course, support from GitHub will have some type of best effort, but they can't guarantee the recovery, especially in an SLA that works for the business. So not only is it important to make sure that you leave your doors locked and you don't put your laptop in there in your car, but that you actually have insurance on your car as well. That's why today's conversation about backup and recovery for GitHub is so important. But let's talk a little bit about the threats to GitHub. Now we understand, we've always understood, everyone here is an expert, you understand how important GitHub is to your organization. You now have understood the responsibility and where that falls within GitHub and any other SaaS service, but what are the actual threats to GitHub? Now, in the majority of the scenarios with any application, regardless of where it is, you always have three main areas, and they all have different use cases, but you know there's always a chance that somebody's going to delete something, whether it's accidental or malicious. There's always a chance of something being corrupted, and there's always the guarantee that somebody's going to try to encrypt your data, that there's always going to be some form of a cyber threat. We know this all to be true. But because GitHub is used across so many members of the organization, there's so many configurations, so many ways to use it, and that's part of its value. There's also a lot of ways to delete and lose your data. We've had our conversations with other customers, with partners, and we talked about all these scenarios that we always find where people are accidentally deleting something or losing their information in GitHub. All you have to go is go to a forum and search delete, and you'll see hundreds of people who've accidentally deleted something. That's the number one threat. There's always going to be Murphy's Law. There's always going to be somebody who accidentally deletes. But there's so many other threats as well, whether data is overwritten. There's a loss of access credentials. There's a corruption of the repository, an attack, force pushes, unmerged branches, you name it. But Mark, you used to be an engineer. What kind of scared you the most when you were dealing with GitHub? And what do you think you would be concerned about today?
Yeah, these are all very recognizable, and I think a lot of people on the phone probably have dealt with at least one of these. I remember an instance when I was still writing code, and granted that is a while ago. We were just switching from things like Mercurial and Subversion, which is more like a client server model, into Git. So getting used to this distributed nation of Git was definitely took a little bit of time and definitely took some trial and errors as well. People were used to being able to force pushes with Subversion and Mercurial to make sure that things were uploaded to the server, and of course that doesn't work in a distributed model like Git. So yeah, we've actually lost code because somebody overrode, almost like an empty project, did a force push, which wiped out all of the previous branches and versions on the central repository. So yeah, back then backup was not even in our minds, but I think more and more, and as Andy was saying, there's more and more important data and configuration sitting within your GitHub repo. So having a way of doing backups and restores, having that insurance that you can roll back from a deletion, whether that's accidental, whether that is malicious, I think is absolutely critical. Andy.
No, thank you, Mark. And the reality too is back in the day when something was hosted in your own servers, in your own data centers, you felt the responsibility. You knew that you had somebody there who was responsible for making sure that that was protected, that it was
Yep.
compliant. It's always been a bit of a gray area with SaaS, and you have to understand, well, who's responsible for what? Well, it's very clear that you're still responsible, if it's still a SaaS, for your car to make sure that you lock your windows, to make sure that you don't leave your laptop there. But we also know that there's always going to be some scenario where there is data and configuration loss, and you have to plan for it. You have to have a contingency plan.
Yep.
So
In fact, last week I was having a conversation with a prospect, very large, well-known company within the US. And this was for Jira, it was not for GitHub. And we were talking about deletions. He's like, "No, that's part of my SLA." And no, I'm like, so I pulled up the T's and C's for Atlassian for Jira, and I showed him, no, maintaining backups for your data is actually your responsibility. And he was like, I think I need to give them a call and see what's going on. So yeah, even at large companies, there is this misconstrued almost trust in the cloud, saying, no, this is all part of the cloud's responsibility, but in fact it's not. And that's something that's if you don't have that insurance, is going to bite you at some point in time.
absolutely agreed, Mark. And that's why we really wanted to focus the first session on GitHub.
Mm-hmm.
You know that you have to protect your tier one VMs, your cloud instances. That's always known. But what about something that's equally as mission critical to the organization as GitHub? So we created a little bit of a small checklist for you around what are the things that you need to look at to make sure that your GitHub is truly protected. And not just, within the selfish context of backup, but also from a true protection perspective. Here is the way that we see it. There's always a couple of table stakes, but it's funny to always see the same things happen and people don't address them, right? The majority of attacks today are simply because people still have bad use of passwords. They haven't enabled MFA, and then they get attacked. And it sounds very basic, but it's critical. To be able to protect all of your SaaS applications, you have to make sure that you enable MFA for them. You have to make sure that you're always limiting and monitoring access permissions, especially if you're in a large development environment. People leave all the time. You work with agencies. You have to make sure that you limit and monitor the access and permissions. But you also want to enable branch protection rules and always have review processes for merge as well. There are so many possible permutations that could go wrong. You have to make sure that you have clear delineation of responsibility, of access, and who has approval rights within GitHub as well. And then from the recovery perspective, you have to make sure that you have regular backups. You need your own backups, and you have to do it in a way that meets your SLAs. Can you go with 3 days of lost data within GitHub? Is it 1 day? Is it every 4 hours? You need, as an organization, to decide that. Just like you decided with your tier one apps and your production applications, GitHub requires the same level. But it's also very important to make sure that you store your copies on immutable storage. This is not simply about writing a script and then keeping some files somewhere. You want to make sure it's immutable. You want to make sure it's protected, vaulted, so that if somebody were to attack you, that you always have a clean copy of your data to be able to recover from. But the most important piece here is test the recovery itself. Use one of your sandboxes, test the recovery workflows. You do not have a backup if you do not test it. So these are very basic, but very, very, very important checklist items to consider. But something that I want to mention too is you could think, well, Andy, yes, I actually already know this, and this is why we're already scripting backups. But as you know, scripting a backup is easy. You can store that data anywhere you need to. But what about recovery? How easy is it to recover your data if somebody deletes a repo or a pull or any types of assets? How do you go about recovering then? And are you managing your script? How much time are you spending on doing that? And the reason I'm asking all these questions conveniently is because we actually want to show you what we at Haiku are calling it the undelete button. It's not the undo button, it's the undelete button, especially in the context of things like GitHub, Circle CI, Jira. You want to have something that makes sure that you can undelete because a backup is easy. Anyone can script. Most of you on this call can script a backup to S3. It's about the recovery. It's about making sure that it's protected, access control, but most importantly, that it's recoverable. So Mark, do you want to take us through this demo real quick and actually show us a live GitHub recovery?
Yeah, of course. No, I would love to. If you go to the next slide, we can go do a very quick recap of what we'll show you. But basically, um, I'm planning to run through all of these, and we'll come back to this slide. If I can share my screen really quickly, Andy, I'll dive into that
Yeah.
right now. And if you have questions, please feel free to use the Q&A box. We're both monitoring that, so we can answer those as those come in. Let me see. I believe you can see my screen now, right now, Andy.
I can.
Perfect, awesome. So this is what we call HYCU Protege. Multi-tenant service. It's a backup as a service platform that allows you to protect any kind of workloads within your organization. It goes for basically from on-prem to cloud and more into SaaS and so on as well. But we're going to focus on the SaaS side of house with GitHub today, right? Of course, we can sign in with your major IDP providers. So let's do that really quickly. And once we're logging in, this drops us at the main dashboard for the entire organization. Let me zoom out really quickly over here. So this is the main dashboard. It gives you enough information around what backups have I set up? Are they running okay? Are there any failures? Am I compliant? In the end, you want to see, am I compliant as an organization? One of the things that we have developed over the last year or so is this tool on the left that we call rgraph. Think of rgraph as a discovery tool within your organization that discovers data sources, that discovers applications, that discovers sources of configuration as well. And we do that by hooking into either your Okta or your Azure AD. And then once we are in there, we can scan, read only, of course, we can scan your organization's configuration, and we can start discovering SaaS services or any kind of data sources that we can protect for you, right? And so if I go to the left over here, there's a few that are unprotected right now. For instance, Box. Box in our demo environment is not backed up yet. We're working on that right now. It's in active development. But basically, once you know that, for instance, somebody in your organization or a department within your organization is running Box, now you know that at some point in time you need to think about protecting that, right? So basically, we discover a whole bunch of SaaS services, and for each of them, we overlay that with information around how protected they are themselves. What we've noticed is, and Andy and I have looked at a lot of different services, is that a lot of these services don't have any user-facing data protection capabilities in terms of being able to manage backups, doing self-service restores, even being able to export. We see that we see that very infrequent. For the guys that we are protecting, we basically overlay this with information around, hey, are we protecting all of the data sources? Are you in compliance? And we roll that up to the departmental level. But more importantly, we roll all of those stats up to the organization level. So in one glance, you have a scorecard of how protected I am. What is the risk profile across all of those data sources that I have within the organization? And basically roll up. So your CISO, your CIO will be very happy to know that about 1/3 of the data sources are protected. And out of that 1/3, we're doing really, really well. We're compliant out on 68 out of 70. Right. But let's zoom in a little bit to GitHub, because that's why we're all here today. So engineering, basically, I can zoom in on this, right? And now basically I can just see what's within engineering, and I can actually set up roles that only are limited to the scope within engineering. If I double click again on GitHub, I now zoom in on my GitHub projects, my GitHub repos that I have discovered already. And this discovery, of course, happens with a service cloud. Give us an API key, and we can go into your GitHub service account, your GitHub deployments, and we can start discovering all of those projects and releases and so on. In this case, you can see we have one of them, release 1.0. We have that protected with bronze already. And then 2 we have excluded, so they're being excluded from backups right now. Setting up protection of these is very, very easy. So, for instance, if I go to this project over here, I can now need to move this guy out of the way. I can go into assign policy, and I can pick whatever policy is appropriate for that particular project. Right? If it's very important, maybe I want to back up every 2 hours. If it's less important, I can maybe back it up once a week. Right, so we ship with a few of these default policies, but of course you can create your own policies as well. Let me show you that really quickly. Policies, here you see all of those. I can go to new, and I can basically select or create any policy that's matches or that is aligned with the business requirements that the business has given you around the SLAs for data protection. One of the things that we're very proud of and is very important to us is the notion of where we store the backups that we create for you. We always connect to storage that you own, always connect to storage that you manage. We never store data within our stack, so we never have access to your data. We always basically connect to the application and then move it to storage that you own, that you manage from a lifecycle protection. So from a data governance perspective, very clean model. Today we support Amazon S3, Google Cloud Storage, and then S3 compatible storage, which is Wasabi. Over the course of this year, you'll see us add more and more storage targets for this as well. Eventually, I want to be able to go back to on-prem, so you can basically take your SaaS data and have a copy on-prem. So, like I said, everything is policy-based. It's set and forget, right? So at the moment, I have this bronze policy assigned to this particular project. You can see over here, it's bronze, so it basically takes a backup every day. You can see over the last few days, every day around 5:15, it takes a backup. It's set and forget. It's that insurance policy that you need just in case something goes wrong, somebody makes an oopsie, or somebody gets in with malicious intent and starts deleting things, right? So in this case, I'm basically protecting this instance, our demo account instance, right? So for this particular release 1.0 project, I have 2 releases published already, but I noticed that it's super easy to actually delete a release within GitHub. It just takes 2 clicks, right? And if you're not thinking about it, now all of the data is gone and you cannot recover it anymore unless you have like a local copy and things like that. Let me show you how easy it is to recover from this 2-click oopsie that we just did. Right, so now I'm going back to the same release. I have it selected. Let's select the most recent backup that I actually created yesterday while I was testing all of this, preparing for the demo. Click this guy over here, and now I can click restore. Here, now you can see the granularity at which HYCU can restore data for you. Of course, we can restore the entire repository, but we can down to a single issue, a single pull request, or a single release as well. So let's click on release really quickly. This takes a little bit of time because, of course, we have to scan the backup now and really go through what's stored within the backup so we can show you very context-aware data around all of the projects and the versions and so on that were present at the time of backup. So this is going to take about another minute. I wanted to talk to you about some of the other things we can protect as well. Like Andy was saying in the beginning, this platform allows us to protect virtual machines, cloud-based instances, SaaS, PaaS, and DBaaS sources, all in exactly the same way. Use that policy and you can reuse those over and over again to basically set up protection for any of those data sources and store it into the storage that you already own. Very simple. It's really set and forget. It just takes a couple of minutes to get up and going. And we'll show you at the end also how you can do a trial for this. So stay tuned for that. Andy, any things you want to inject right here while we're waiting for the page to load?
No, yeah, Mark, one of the things that you mentioned, and apart from maybe we should elevator music to this, I think it would be nice. What we can talk about too, though, is now everything is stored in GitHub, but you also have very specific data configuration elements in your Terraform, in your cloud formations, even in your IAM roles. And with Haiku, it's not, we don't just let you restore within GitHub and then get some of that information. Somebody deletes or corrupts your GitHub repositories, but you can actually just restore from Terraform itself. So we have purpose-built native, the same level of restore that Mark is about to show you for Terraform, for Circle CI, for Jira, for Confluence, for all of these services from build to prod that allow you to be able to handle that. And we'll probably show you later on what that looks like. And you can always try any of them yourself. But Mark, I think you're ready.
Yep, it's loaded. So basically over here, and the way we approach this is it's very application specific. So what you see on the left in the tree, for Jira, we would show you all of the issues that are within Jira in the right hierarchy, right? For things like Trello, and you'll see boards and tickets and things like that. So completely application dependent. But basically, I can now select GA1.1, the version that I just did an oopsie on. I can click next. Over here, I actually can show, oh, do I want to also restore the release assets? Of course, I want to do that, so I enable that. And that's it. In just 2-3 clicks, I can now actually go off, and the system will now once again open up the backup and basically do the restore and so on. And of course, there's task-based reporting on all of that. But in just a few clicks, you can restore, you can recover from an oopsie that happens within production. So very, very easy, but very, very powerful capabilities. Of course, like I said, you can I cannot go into restore because there's one going on already. But you can do it for the entire project. So if somebody deleted the project, you can do that, right? What Andy was referring to early on, you can also go into like a sandbox environment, although not really live yet, but in like the next release, we'll be able to go into a sandbox environment as well and do a test restore in there. So you can really test out, making sure that from a DR perspective, from a business continuity perspective, you have all of the ducks in a row over there. One thing I still wanted to point out, and I didn't talk about that before, when we connect to storage that you own, you can always enable worm. You can always enable basically a feature for storage that says nobody can ever delete an object until the timer runs out. Right. So for instance, if I set a worm and I make the immutability period, I make that 30 days, nobody can go in and encrypt that backup, right? At the point in time an object is a backup, I can delete that backup until the 30 days is actually expired. Not even if you have super admin level credentials, you will not be able to delete that backup. So at that point in time, because that backup is locked, it is safe. Nobody can delete it. Nobody can encrypt it. It is your last known good copy. So it's your last line of defense against any things like a malicious attack or a ransomware attack and so on. So highly encourage you to enable worm for all of your backup storage. Let's see if the restore happens. The restore happens successfully. So if I now go back over here and I do a refresh, you can actually see I have my GA 1.1 version back. Of course, we assigned some labels so we don't override any remnants and so on. So we basically assign a label with the timestamp at which the backup occurred. But you can see it's back. I have my, of course, there was a very important picture that needed to be added of myself, of course. But yeah, basically within just a few minutes, I was able to recover from an oopsie that somebody could have done within your organization. And this happens, this works the same for all of the applications that we that we support. For instance, if I go into Jira really quickly, Andy, and then I'll hand it back to you. You can see for Jira, we can restore back to a single attachment, to a single story, to a single subtask, and so on. So very granular recovery for all of the applications that we support.
Mark, actually, if you could reshare for a second, because we really want to show that this is about every stage of development, every stage of deployment, you're able to make sure that you restore to avoid misconfigurations or downtime. Mark, if you could actually go to the DevOps protection set,
Yep.
just to find Terraform if it's in the DevOps protection set, because I want to show folks that they're going to be able to restore very specific state files templates within Terraform as well. By the way, everything that we're showing you applies the same to the data structure of cloud formations as well. So instead of having to scroll through and try to find your version control within GitHub, you can even just restore, for example, a variable set or a policy yourself directly to prod. And the same thing is not just across Terraform or Circle CI. Mark mentioned Jira Confluence, but even also things like Key Management Service and IAM as well have the ability to restore and reduce any type of risk of data loss, corruption, or misconfiguration across your entire ecosystem, across your entire cloud and development architecture. So with that, Mark, I would love to share a couple of highlights. And then from there, I want to provide everybody with today's offer so that they can actually see this for themselves and try it themselves.
Yep. Awesome. Let me stop sharing and you can grab the screen again.
Perfect. Let me know when you can see that.
I can.
Perfect. Now, just as a quick summary of what Mark showed you, what you see in GitHub applies across the board, from the Atlassian suite to GitHub to Salesforce to anything else. And the most important thing, the hardest thing to do, is recovery, granular recovery, not an entire instance, but actual granular recovery, whether it's at the repo level, issues, releases, requests, and much more. All backups can be easily done in one click. Of course, you can say, I just need a daily backup. You have that in one click, or you can go and create your own. You define your backup frequency, you define your retention period. But something that's very unique to HYCU, data is always in your control. These backup copies do not go to some data center that HYCU owns. They go to your S3 buckets that are your control, that you configure the residency and everything that you need to comply with. You always have, and especially for those who are joining us and our customers and partners in Europe, whether it's DORA regulations or NIS2, these are critical areas to have that are going to allow you to fly by from a compliance perspective. And as Mark mentioned, GitHub is a critical target, and you must treat it that way. And so being able to have immutable backups, you do not lose anything if you do this, and we always recommend it for extremely critical applications. And of course, it's not just GitHub, it's across your entire flow, your entire tech stack, that you can recover files, that you can recover functions, that you can recover or restore configurations as well. Now with that, I want to show you just a couple of things that we already protect, but we have more than 64 integrations. Now today we already protect GitHub, but shortly we are adding Bitbucket and then GitLab as well, depending on the repository of your choice. The capabilities will be the same, but we're also able to help you on the things that you use to build apart from your repos, things like Jira, Confluence, Asana, Notion, Monday, Trello, all managed from the same place with item level restore. And of course, deployment, CI/CD with your Terraform, your formations, your Circle CI, but also production, also your critical cloud infrastructure, IaaS, PaaS, database as a service, even serverless within your public clouds, you're able to protect with HYCU. But I prefer you go see it for yourself. See exactly how many integrations that we had. This is the power of our cloud platform. And a lot of you that have been customers for a while, you were there in our announcement in February. We had 3 or 2 SaaS applications that we protected in February. Because of the power of the platform, we have over 60 integrations today within the marketplace that you can go and protect. Anything that you want from M365 all the way to a vector database like Pinecone. It doesn't matter if it's critical, we seek to protect it here at HYCU. So as a customer, as a partner, if there's something that we haven't protected yet, tell us. You can even request applications support for this from the marketplace itself, but you will always have our ear and we will always prioritize what our customers ask. So if you say, Andy, Mark, we really need something like, I'm running out of SaaS application examples now, Mark, but let's call it Snowflake or Tableau or Power BI. these workflows are important for me. Is this something that we can build? Well, with our platform, it's not a 2-year discussion. It's a much faster adoption, a much faster release, and we will always prioritize our customers. Now, with that being said, the best thing for you to do today, instead of just the webinar, it's actually just go try it for yourself. If you scan this QR code, and Mark has already posted on the chat a link to the trial, you can go and just turn this on. You can explore any service, you can try any service on there, free for 14 days, but you're able to simply go on there, add your API token, and connect GitHub. If you need help setting it up, if you have questions, there's always going to be one of our customer success engineers there to help you. This is not a selling motion. We truly want you to be able to test it. If this works for you, then we'll make sure that you have protection that you need for GitHub or any other service that you pick. Now, with that being said, I'm going to keep this on for a while, and I want to address any questions from the audience. Mark, I'm checking the QA now. I don't see any questions, but please, any questions, comments, please leave them, and then Mark and I will address them. If you have something that you don't want to ask yet, you want to reach out to us directly, we will send you our emails, and you're able to reach out to us directly with any questions, concerns, or even requests for certain applications to build. But I'll leave it for a couple seconds there. And Mark, I don't know if you wanted to mention something.
Yeah, no, John just posted a question. How is this licensed? What's the subscription model for GitHub, Andy?
So it's on a per user basis. One of the goals that we have is to make sure that everything that we do is an easy, digestible way to understand how it's licensed. So for GitHub, for Atlassian, for all these other services, it's going to be on a per user basis. For other things, for example, instances or databases, it's going to be on a capacity level, but we keep it very simple to how many users do you have, and that's how we'll be able to license this.
Yep, no, good. Question from Johan. He's in Germany. He's concerned about where we store backups. Is he able to basically keep the backups within like German storage providers and so on?
Absolutely. And Johan, that's one of the reasons, one of our core design principles is to make sure that all data is stored in your S3 bucket. There's not a bucket out there that HYCU owns and we're storing it. We're not telling you. This is all stored. And in fact, you can think of HYCU, especially for our customers out there who already use us, think of us as an encrypted highway. From the source of the application, right? We connect Atlassian, GitHub, you name it, all the way to your S3 bucket. That data is fully encrypted at rest and in flight. We do not store it. This is the reason that we're able to sell into federal governments, the reason that we're able to help protect some of the most compliant environments on earth, simply because we do not store the backups. We don't want to. That's just another attack vector. We want to make sure data is always, always in your control.
Yep. Another question, Max, I think UK. How long can we keep data around? What's the maximum retention for data?
You choose the retention period. If that means it's 3 weeks, if you simply want to keep a monthly retention period in case there's an active project, or you have it because you're a healthcare organization or finance, and you want to keep things for 5 years, 7 years, there's no limitation on that. You choose because it's your storage in your control. Storage is so cost effective these days that especially things like GitHub, if you wanted to leave it on for as long as possible, you can. It's your choice.
Yep. Yeah, I see what I showed you today is really protection against deletions, right? An oopsie, a misconfiguration, a misbehaving script, and so on. But there's a secondary use case that we support with this as well, and it's really around compliance. If you're in one of those industries that has a lot of compliance regulations, now you can prove to the auditors that actually I am keeping this data around for 1 year, 3 year, 5 year, whatever the compliance requirements are. I think right now we can configure up to 99 years within product, but if you have indefinite, let us know. I'm sure we have a backdoor switch that we can enable that as well. So yeah, compliance is one of the secondary use cases that we go after.
No, absolutely. And it makes total sense, especially in highly regulated environments. But what I wanted to mention too is I wanted to thank you all for your time. This will not be the last you hear of us. There are going to be so many different topics. Some of it will be on-prem. It'll be focused on DR to the cloud. In other areas, it's going to be around cloud native applications. You're going to see so many different use cases, so many applications of HYCU that every month we're going to devote some time to it. So if you have suggestions, please let us know. And at worst, if you got anything from this webinar, it's that Mark likes to say the word oopsie a lot. That alone to me is extremely valuable now that I know that. But we want to thank you for your time. Please, you will receive an email with a copy of the webinar, but any questions, reach out to us directly. We'll make sure to address it. But if not, we will see you next month. Take care.
Thanks, everybody.